They are exhausted, not from their own life, but from carrying everyone else's. They walk through the world with invisible weights pressing down on their shoulders, their chest, their soul, weights they did not choose, did not ask for, did not create, but somehow inherited. The lonely ones, the ones who sit in quiet rooms feeling the crushing pressure of sorrows that are not theirs, anxieties that do not belong to them, expectations they never agreed to meet. They carry their mother's unfulfilled dreams, their father's unexpressed rage, their family's unprocessed trauma, the collective grief of generations who never learned to feel, and they carry it all alone, in silence, in isolation, believing that this crushing weight is simply what life feels like, that exhaustion is normal, that carrying everyone else's pain while drowning in their own is just who they are. But it is not. The weight that the lonely carry is not theirs, and it is destroying them, slowly, quietly, completely. Carl Jung discovered something that changes everything about how we understand loneliness and emotional burden. He found that we do not just carry our own psychological material, we carry our families, our lineages, our cultures. Jung called this the collective unconscious, the inherited reservoir of human experience that shapes us before we are old enough to choose. And for some people, for the lonely ones, this inheritance is not wisdom or strength. It is weight, unprocessed trauma, unexpressed emotion, unfulfilled longings, all passed down through generations like heirlooms no one wanted but everyone keeps. And the lonely ones take it all on, not because they are weak, but because they are sensitive, because they feel deeply, because their nervous systems are attuned to the emotional frequencies others ignore, and so they become the carriers, the holders, the ones who absorb what no one else wants to face, and they do it alone, because no one else can see the weight, no one else acknowledges the burden, no one else understands why they are so tired when their life looks so ordinary. This is why the lonely ones feel exhausted doing nothing, why they can wake up after sleeping 10 hours and still feel drained, why they can sit quietly and feel like they ran a marathon, because they are carrying weight, not physical weight, emotional weight, psychological weight, ancestral weight, and weight that is not yours is always heavier because it does not fit, because your body was not designed to carry it, because you do not have the context for why it is there or the permission to put it down. So you carry it, day after day, year after year, wondering why you feel so heavy when your life looks so light, why you feel so burdened when you seem to have so little, why you feel so alone when people are around. It is because the weight isolates you. It creates a barrier between you and others, because they cannot see it, cannot understand it, cannot help you carry it, and you cannot explain it, because you do not even understand it yourself. You just know you are exhausted, lonely, crushed under the weight of something you cannot name. Today, they are going to see the 4 weights the lonely carry that are not theirs, the ancestral trauma passed down through bloodlines, the parental expectations they never asked to fulfill, the cultural conditioning that shapes them against their will, and the collective grief they absorb from a world in pain. Look at these 4 weights, not with shame, not with despair, but with the radical recognition that carrying what is not yours is not noble. It is not your purpose. It is not what you were put here to do. You were not born to be a dumping ground for everyone else's unprocessed pain. You were not meant to carry your family's trauma, so they do not have to feel it. You were not designed to absorb the world's grief, so others can stay numb. You are a human being, with your own life, your own journey, your own weight to carry. And that is enough. More than enough. Jung taught that individuation, becoming who you actually are, requires separating what is yours from what is theirs, requires putting down the weight you were handed before you were old enough to refuse it, requires finally courageously saying, "This is not mine. I will not carry it anymore." The lonely ones have been carrying too much for too long, and the weight is destroying them. Not because they are weak, but because no one was meant to carry what does not belong to them, not alone, not in silence, not forever. Make your choice. Which weight are they carrying? And then stay, because what comes next will not justify the burden. It will show them why the burden was never theirs to carry. And how to finally, after all this time, put it down. The loneliness ends not when others finally understand. It ends when they stop carrying what was never theirs, when they reclaim their energy, when they choose themselves over the weight, and discover that without the burden, they are not empty. They are finally fully free. If they recognize the ancestral trauma, the weight of pain that happened generations before they were born, they have revealed the burden that is crushing them from the inside. They carry their grandmother's fear, their grandfather's rage, the starvation their great-grandparents endured, the war their ancestors survived, the abuse that was normalized, the losses that were never grieved. All of it lives in them, not as memory, as sensation, as unexplained anxiety, as chronic depression. As patterns they cannot break. They did not choose this inheritance. They did not ask for it, but it was passed down anyway, through DNA, through family dynamics, through the silent transmission of unprocessed trauma that moves through bloodlines like a curse looking for someone to break it. And the lonely ones, the sensitive ones, the ones who feel everything, they are the ones who carry it most heavily. If ancestral trauma is their weight, their exhaustion is not about their life. It is about carrying lifetimes of pain that were never resolved. They learned to carry this weight before they had language for it. Maybe they grew up feeling inexplicably sad, anxious without reason, terrified of things that never happened to them. Maybe they inherited their mother's fear of abandonment, even though they were never abandoned. Maybe they absorbed their father's rage, even though he never directed it at them. Maybe they feel the poverty consciousness of ancestors who starved even though they have never known hunger. Jung called this transgenerational trauma, the psychological and emotional wounds that are passed from one generation to the next when trauma is not processed. When grief is not felt, when rage is not expressed, it does not disappear. It goes underground. It lives in the body, in the nervous system, in the unconscious, and it waits for someone sensitive enough to feel it, someone brave enough to carry it, someone lonely enough to believe that this crushing weight is just who they are. In Jungian terms, this is the personal unconscious being colonized by the collective unconscious, the individual carrying what belongs to the lineage, the lonely one becoming the holder of ancestral pain so the family system can stay unconscious. If they carry ancestral trauma, they are not just living their own life, they are reliving their ancestors' unlived lives. Their unprocessed emotions, their unhealed wounds. And this creates a specific kind of loneliness, because no one around them understands. Their friends do not get why they are so anxious. Their partners cannot comprehend why they are so triggered. Their family cannot see that they are carrying the family's pain, because the family is still unconscious of it, still denying it, still pretending that trauma dies with the traumatized. But it does not. It lives on, in the next generation and the next, until someone finally feels it fully, processes it completely, and breaks the cycle. People who carry ancestral trauma experience life as inexplicably heavy. They feel old, tired, burdened, like they have lived 1,000 lives, because in a way, they have. They carry the emotional residue of everyone who came before, every unfelt grief, every unexpressed rage, every suppressed fear, and it lives in their body as chronic illness, as autoimmune disease, as depression that has no clear cause, as anxiety that makes no logical sense, as patterns of self-sabotage that seem to come from nowhere. But they do not come from nowhere. They come from the lineage, from the unprocessed material of ancestors who could not face their pain and so passed it down. And the lonely one, the carrier, is left trying to understand why they feel so destroyed when their life looks so normal, why they are so exhausted when they have done so little, why they are so alone when they are surrounded by family. It is because they are carrying what the family refuses to carry, and that burden isolates them, because no one else can see it, and they cannot put it down because they do not even know it is not theirs. Breaking free requires recognition. They must see that the weight they carry is not theirs, that the fear is not their fear, the rage is not their rage, the grief is not their grief. It belongs to someone who came before, someone who could not process it, someone who passed it down hoping the next generation would be strong enough to finally feel it, and they are. They are strong enough, but not by carrying it alone, not by shouldering ancestral pain in silence, not by believing that this burden is their identity. They break the cycle by acknowledging it, by saying, "This is not mine, this belongs to my ancestors, and I honor them by feeling it fully, by processing it consciously, by grieving what they could not grieve, by expressing what they could not express, and then, finally, by letting it go." The ancestral trauma is not their weight to carry forever. It is their gift to transform. And transformation begins when they stop carrying alone and start sharing the burden with awareness, ritual, therapy, community. The loneliness of carrying ancestral weight ends when they realize they are not alone. Their ancestors are with them, waiting for someone to finally free the lineage from the weight, and they are that someone. If this revealed their weight, subscribe to learn how to release what is not theirs. Comment which burden they carry. Their honesty might help someone else see their invisible weight. If they recognize the parental expectations, the weight of living a life designed to fulfill someone else's unfulfilled dreams, they have revealed the burden that is suffocating their authenticity. They carry their parents' wishes, their parents' disappointments, their parents' unlived potential. They became the doctor their father never could be, the successful one their mother always wanted to be, the stable one their parents needed them to be because their own lives felt chaotic. They absorbed the message that their purpose is not to live their own life, but to complete their parents' unfinished business. And they did it. They pursued the career their parents wanted. They followed the path their parents designed. They became who their parents needed them to be, and now they are lonely, exhausted, empty, because they are living someone else's dream while their own dreams suffocate under the weight of parental expectation. If parental expectations are their burden, their loneliness is not about lacking connection, it is about lacking themselves. They learned to carry this weight early. Maybe they were praised only when they achieved, only when they made their parents proud, only when they lived up to the image their parents had for them. Maybe they watched a parent struggle and decided their job was to succeed where the parent failed. Maybe they absorbed the unspoken message that they exist to validate their parents' choices, to prove their parents were good parents, to be the trophy that makes the family look successful. So they stopped asking what they wanted. They stopped pursuing their own interests. They stopped being themselves, and they became the projection, the child designed to fulfill parental expectation, and it worked. Their parents are proud, their family is impressed, but they are dying inside, because they are not living their life. They are living their parents' fantasy, and no amount of parental approval fills the void where their authentic self used to be. In Jungian psychology, this is the child carrying the parent's shadow, the unlived life of the parent being lived through the child. Jung taught that parents unconsciously project their unfulfilled potential onto their children, hoping the child will achieve what they could not. And sensitive children, lonely children, children who need approval, they take on this projection as identity. They believe their worth is contingent on fulfilling parental dreams, that disappointing their parents means being unlovable, so they sacrifice their authentic path. They pursue careers they hate. They live in places they do not want to live. They become who their parents need them to be. And they call it duty, they call it respect, they call it love. But it is not. It is self-abandonment in service of parental expectation. And it creates a loneliness so profound that no amount of external success can cure it. People who carry parental expectations as weight live successful lives that feel empty. They have impressive careers that bore them. They have stable lives that suffocate them. They have achieved everything their parents wanted and feel like they have achieved nothing, because none of it is theirs. It was all designed to earn approval, to make parents proud, to prove that the child was worth the investment. And now they are decades into a life they never chose, wondering why they feel so alone, so disconnected, so exhausted. It is because they abandoned themselves to carry their parents' weight. They gave up their dreams to fulfill someone else's, and the lonely truth is that their parents might be proud, but they are empty. And parental pride does not cure the emptiness that comes from living inauthentically. The cost of carrying parental expectations is devastating. It is their actual life, the one they would have lived if they had been free to choose, the career that would have fulfilled them, the place they would have lived, the person they would have become. All sacrificed to be who their parents needed, and they tell themselves it was worth it, that honoring parents means living for them. But honoring parents does not require self-destruction. It does not require abandoning your authentic path. It does not require carrying their unlived dreams as your identity. Real honoring means becoming fully yourself and letting parents deal with their own disappointments, their own unfulfilled potential, their own unlived lives. Because those are not your responsibility. You are not here to complete your parents' unfinished business. You are here to live your own life. Breaking free requires the most difficult act, disappointing them. Admitting that the life they designed for you is not the life you want, that their expectations are not your calling, that their dreams are not yours, and then choosing yourself anyway, choosing to pursue what actually calls to you even if they do not understand, even if they are hurt, even if they withdraw approval. Because living for their approval while dying inside is not sustainable. The weight of parental expectation is not yours to carry forever. It was given before you could refuse, but now you can. Now you can say, I love you. But this is not my life, this is yours, and I am giving it back. The loneliness ends not when they finally understand. It ends when you finally choose yourself over their expectations, and discover that you are lovable even when you disappoint them. If they recognize the cultural conditioning, the weight of living according to societal scripts they never agreed to follow, they have revealed the burden that is imprisoning their spirit. They carry the culture's definition of success, the culture's timeline for life milestones, the culture's rules for what makes a life valuable. They absorb the message that they must achieve certain things by certain ages, or they are failures. That they must look a certain way, earn a certain amount, live a certain lifestyle, or they do not matter. That their worth is contingent on external markers of success rather than internal measures of fulfillment. And they have been trying, striving, achieving, checking boxes, and still feeling empty because they are living according to a script they never wrote, following rules they never questioned. Pursuing a definition of success that was programmed into them before they were conscious enough to refuse it. If cultural conditioning is their weight, their loneliness is not about failing to fit in. It is about succeeding at fitting in while losing themselves completely. They internalize these cultural scripts without awareness, maybe through media that sold them an image of the good life, maybe through education that taught them what smart looks like. Maybe through family that reinforced cultural values, maybe through peer pressure that punished difference and rewarded conformity. Whatever the source, they learned what they are supposed to want, what they are supposed to pursue, what they are supposed to be, and they became that, or they tried to. They pursued the prestigious career because that is what success looks like. They accumulated wealth because that is what security looks like. They built the impressive life because that is what winning looks like. And they did it all while suffocating, because none of it came from their authentic desires. It all came from cultural conditioning, from the collective voice that told them who to be before they knew who they were. In Jungian terms, this is the tyranny of the collective consciousness, the pressure to conform to societal norms that override individual authenticity. Jung warned that when the collective becomes too powerful, the individual disappears. People stop living their own lives and start living according to script. They pursue goals they were told to pursue. They measure success by standards they never chose. They build lives designed to impress rather than express, and the result is a profound loneliness, because they are surrounded by people who are also performing, also following scripts, also living according to conditioning. And no one is actually present. No one is actually themselves. They are all playing roles, and the lonely ones, the sensitive ones who feel the emptiness of performance, they carry the weight of cultural conditioning most heavily, because they know something is wrong, but they cannot name it, cannot fix it, cannot escape it, so they keep performing, and the weight keeps crushing them. People who carry cultural conditioning as weight live lives that look perfect and feel hollow. They have everything the culture says they should want: the degree, the career, the house, the family, the lifestyle, and they feel nothing. Or they feel trapped, because none of it reflects who they actually are. It reflects who the culture told them to be. And living as a cultural construct instead of an authentic individual creates a loneliness that no amount of conformity can cure. Because conformity requires abandoning yourself, requires following someone else's blueprint, requires living for external validation rather than internal fulfillment. And external validation is bottomless. No amount of achievement, accumulation, or approval fills the void that self-abandonment creates. The cost of carrying cultural conditioning is total. It is their authentic life, the one they would live if they were free from cultural pressure, the career that would actually fulfill them, even if it is not prestigious, the lifestyle that would actually satisfy them, even if it looks simple, the definition of success that reflects their values instead of the culture's. All of it sacrificed to fit in, to be normal, to avoid being seen as weird, different, unsuccessful. And they tell themselves this is practical, this is realistic, this is what adults do. But it is not. It is what unconscious people do. Conscious people question. Conscious people differentiate their authentic desires from programmed ones. Conscious people choose to live by their own values, even when it means rejecting cultural norms. And that requires courage the lonely ones have not yet claimed. Breaking free requires rebellion. Not loud rebellion, quiet rebellion. The kind where you stop following cultural scripts and start writing your own. Where you define success by your standards. Where you pursue what actually fulfills you, even if the culture does not value it. Where you build a life that expresses who you are, instead of impresses who they are. And yes, this means disappointing the culture, means being seen as unsuccessful by people who measure success wrong, means being judged by people who are still unconscious. But living for cultural approval while dying inside is worse. The weight of cultural conditioning is not yours to carry forever. It was installed before you were aware, but now you are, and you can choose. Keep conforming and suffocating, or finally break free and breathe. If they recognize the collective grief, the weight of absorbing the world's suffering as though it is their own, they have revealed the burden that is drowning them in despair. They feel everything, the pain of strangers, the suffering of the planet, the injustice in the news, the collective trauma of humanity. They cannot scroll social media without absorbing someone's crisis, cannot watch the news without carrying the world's grief, cannot walk through the world without feeling the ambient suffering that others seem immune to. They are empaths, highly sensitive, spiritually attuned, and they thought this sensitivity was a gift, but it has become a curse. Because they have no boundaries, no filter, no way to stop the world's pain from flooding into them, and they carry it all, alone, in silence, believing that feeling everything is just who they are, but it is not. They are not meant to be emotional dumping grounds for collective suffering. If collective grief is their weight, their loneliness is not about lacking support. It is about carrying too much that was never theirs to carry. They absorbed this pattern young. Maybe they were the child who felt everyone's emotions, who knew when mom was sad even when she smiled, who carried dad's stress even when he hid it, who became the emotional barometer for the whole family. Maybe they were praised for being sensitive, for being caring, for being understanding, and they learned that their value comes from absorbing others' pain, from being the one who holds space, from carrying what others cannot carry, so they kept doing it. They grew up and became the friend everyone calls in crisis, the partner who takes on their lover's trauma, the colleague who absorbs workplace toxicity, and they do it without boundaries, without protection. Without realizing that absorbing collective grief is not the same as compassion. Compassion has boundaries, absorption has none, and they are absorbing constantly, until they are so full of others' pain that they have no room for their own life. In Jungian psychology, this is the dissolution of ego boundaries in service of the collective, the individual becoming so merged with others' suffering that they lose sense of self. Jung taught that healthy individuation requires differentiation, knowing where you end and others begin. But people who carry collective grief have no boundaries. They feel everything as though it is happening to them. A stranger's tragedy becomes their trauma. A friend's crisis becomes their emergency. The world's suffering becomes their personal burden, and they cannot turn it off, cannot stop feeling, cannot protect themselves from the constant influx of pain. So they carry it, and it crushes them. And they do not understand why they feel so destroyed when nothing that bad has actually happened to them personally. It is because they are carrying everyone else's bad, and that is not sustainable. People who carry collective grief live in emotional overwhelm. They wake up anxious from dreams about things that are not their problems. They scroll social media and end up crying over strangers' suffering. They watch the news and feel personally responsible for fixing the world's injustices. They cannot enjoy their own good fortune when they know others are suffering. They cannot be happy when they know the world is in pain, so they live in a constant state of vicarious trauma, absorbing everyone else's grief, carrying the weight of collective suffering, and destroying themselves in the process because they believe that feeling everything is noble, that carrying collective pain is their purpose, that being a sponge for suffering makes them compassionate, but it does not. It makes them martyrs, and martyrdom is not service, it is self-destruction disguised as virtue. The cost of carrying collective grief is their peace, their joy, their ability to be present in their own life. They cannot enjoy a beautiful day when they know someone somewhere is suffering. They cannot celebrate their successes when others are struggling. They cannot be happy when the world is not happy. So they live in perpetual emotional crisis, overwhelmed by pain that is not theirs, grieving losses they did not experience, traumatized by events they were not part of, and they call this sensitivity, this awareness, this being spiritually awake. But it is not. It is having no boundaries. It is absorbing without filtering. It is carrying collective weight that no individual was meant to carry alone. Breaking free requires boundaries, not walls, boundaries. Learning to feel compassion without absorption, learning to care without carrying, learning to witness suffering without taking it on as personal burden. This requires recognizing that they are not responsible for healing the world's pain. They are not meant to carry collective grief alone. They are allowed to protect their energy, allowed to turn off the news, allowed to stop scrolling, allowed to say, "This is not mine to carry." And when they do, when they finally establish boundaries between their emotional experience and everyone else's, they do not become cold. They become clear. Clear enough to offer real compassion instead of martyred absorption, clear enough to help from overflow instead of depletion, clear enough to finally live their own life instead of drowning in collective grief. The weight of collective suffering is not theirs to carry. It is humanity's, and they are just one human, allowed to feel their own feelings, allowed to live their own life, allowed to be free. Now that they have seen which weight they carry that is not theirs, now that they understand their exhaustion comes not from weakness, but from carrying burdens they never chose, it is time to face what Carl Jung discovered about liberation. The weight that destroys the lonely is not their own. It is inherited. Ancestral trauma passed through bloodlines, parental expectations imposed before they could refuse, cultural conditioning installed by collective consciousness. Collective grief absorbed through boundaries that do not exist, and Jung taught that awareness is the first step toward freedom, because what is unconscious controls them. What is conscious, they can choose to release. The lonely ones have been carrying these weights unconsciously, believing the heaviness is just life, believing exhaustion is normal, believing isolation is their fault. But it is not. They are lonely because they are carrying too much, and no one can see the weight. So no one understands why they are so tired, so broken, so alone, but now they see it, and seeing is the beginning of putting it down. Jung spent his life studying how psychological material moves through systems, how families pass down unprocessed trauma, how cultures impose conditioning, how the collective unconscious shapes individual experience. And he discovered that sensitive people, the ones who feel deeply, they become the carriers, not by choice, but by nature. Their nervous systems are attuned to frequencies others ignore. They feel the emotional undercurrents. They absorb the unspoken. They carry what others refuse to acknowledge, and this makes them lonely, because they are experiencing a reality others cannot see. They are burdened by weights others do not feel, and when they try to explain, when they say, "I am carrying something heavy," people look at their hands and see nothing, look at their life and see normal, and conclude they are dramatic, oversensitive, making it up. But they are not. The weight is real, it is just invisible, and invisible weight is the loneliest kind to carry, because no one validates the burden, no one acknowledges the struggle, no one says, "I see what you are carrying and it is too much." This is why the lonely ones feel crazy, why they question their own experience, why they wonder if maybe everyone is right and they are just weak. But they are not weak. They are carrying weight that would crush most people, ancestral trauma that spans generations, parental expectations that require self-betrayal, cultural conditioning that demands conformity, collective grief that never ends. And they are carrying it alone, with no support, no acknowledgement, no permission to put it down. Jung taught that the loneliest people are often the most burdened, because burden creates isolation. The more they carry, the less others can relate. The heavier the weight, the harder it is to explain. The more invisible the burden, the more alone they feel. And so they suffer in silence, believing this is just their life, just who they are, just what they deserve. But it is not. They are not meant to carry what is not theirs. No one is. Jung's concept of individuation, becoming fully yourself, requires differentiation, separating what is yours from what is theirs, recognizing that you are not responsible for your ancestors' unresolved trauma. You are not obligated to fulfill your parents' unlived dreams. You are not required to conform to cultural scripts. You are not meant to absorb collective suffering. You are a sovereign being, with your own life, your own path, your own energy, And that energy is meant for living your life, not carrying everyone else's unlived one. Individuation requires saying no to the weight, to the expectations, to the conditioning, to the burden. It requires the most radical act. Putting down what is not yours, and letting others carry their own weight, or not carry it, that is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself, to your life, to your energy, to finally living free of weight that was never yours to carry. But here is what makes this so difficult. The lonely ones have identified with the weight. They believe carrying makes them valuable. That burden gives them purpose, that if they put down the weight, they will be nothing. They will disappoint everyone. They will lose their identity, so they keep carrying, keep destroying themselves, keep believing that martyrdom is love. But it is not. Love does not require self-destruction. Service does not require depletion. Compassion does not require absorption. You can care without carrying. You can feel without absorbing. You can love without losing yourself. And the moment you put down what is not yours, you do not become empty. You become available. Available for your actual life, for your authentic purpose, for relationships where you are not the carrier, for a life where you finally have energy for yourself. Jung taught that the unlived life creates symptoms, depression, anxiety, exhaustion, loneliness, and the lonely ones are living everyone else's unlived life, carrying everyone else's unprocessed material, and suffocating under the weight. The cure is not carrying better. The cure is finally courageously putting it down, and discovering that without the weight, they are not weak, they are free, so now they know which weight they carry that is not theirs. They understand that their exhaustion, their loneliness, their crushing sense of burden comes not from their own life, but from carrying everyone else's. But awareness without action is just painful knowing. Releasing weight that is not yours requires practice, daily, intentional, revolutionary practice. They must learn to differentiate what is theirs from what is theirs to carry, to say no to burdens they never chose, to protect their energy from constant depletion. Here is how they actually put down the weight that is destroying them. If they carry ancestral trauma, their practice is ritual release. They must consciously acknowledge that the fear, the rage, the grief they feel is not all theirs, that some of it belongs to ancestors who could not process it. And they must honor that by creating ritual. Light a candle, speak aloud. I acknowledge the pain of my ancestors. I honor their struggle, and I release what is not mine to carry. Write down the specific traumas they know about or sense. Then burn the paper, symbolically releasing what belongs to the lineage back to the lineage. This is not disrespectful. This is liberation, for them and for the ancestors, because ancestors do not want them to suffer. Ancestors want someone to finally break the cycle, and breaking the cycle means feeling it fully, honoring it completely, and then releasing it consciously. They do not carry it forever. They transform it. And transformation requires letting it move through them and out of them, not holding it, not identifying with it, but releasing it back to source. If they carry parental expectations, their practice is disappointing them, small disappointments at first. They must stop living for parental approval and start living for authentic expression. This means making one choice per week based on what they want, not what their parents want. Choosing the meal they prefer, even if parents judge it. Wearing what they like, even if parents disapprove. Pursuing an interest their parents do not value. And sitting with the discomfort when parents express disappointment. Not defending, not explaining, not trying to make them understand. Just letting them be disappointed. Because their parents' disappointment is not their responsibility. Their parents' unfulfilled dreams are not their burden. And disappointing parents does not make them bad. It makes them real. The weight of parental expectation releases when they finally choose themselves over parental approval and discover that they can survive disappointing their parents, and that surviving it is freedom. If they carry cultural conditioning, their practice is questioning everything. They must audit their life. Look at every goal they are pursuing and ask, is this mine? Did I choose this, or was this programmed into me? Their career, did they choose it for passion or prestige? Their lifestyle, did they build it for fulfillment or image? Their definition of success, is it theirs or the culture's? And when they discover goals that are not authentically theirs, they must have the courage to let them go, to redefine success on their terms, to pursue what actually matters to them, even if the culture does not value it. This means risking being seen as unsuccessful by people who measure success wrong. But living for cultural approval while dying inside is worse. The weight of cultural conditioning releases when they stop following scripts and start writing their own story, and discover that living authentically is worth more than conforming successfully. If they carry collective grief, their practice is boundaries, energetic boundaries. They must learn to witness suffering without absorbing it, to feel compassion without taking on others' pain as personal burden. This means limiting news consumption, unfollowing accounts that trigger vicarious trauma, saying no to friends who only call in crisis, creating space where they are allowed to feel their own feelings instead of everyone else's. And when they feel themselves absorbing collective grief, they must practice release. Visualize the pain flowing through them and into the earth instead of staying in them. Say aloud, "This is not mine to carry. I witness this suffering with compassion, but I release it from my body." The weight of collective grief releases when they establish boundaries between their emotional experience and everyone else's, and discover that having boundaries does not make them cold, it makes them sustainable. For all weights, the universal practice is this: daily energetic clearing. Every night before sleep, they visualize themselves putting down the weight they carried that day. They imagine it flowing out of their body, out of their energy field, back to whoever it belongs to, and they reclaim their energy. Call it back. Say, "I release what is not mine. I reclaim what is mine. I am sovereign." This becomes ritual, daily practice, until putting down weight becomes automatic instead of carrying it being automatic. The lonely ones have been carrying too long, and the practice is simple but revolutionary. Stop carrying what is not yours and discover that without the weight, you are not empty, you are light. Capítulo 08. Conclusão e integração. 800 palavras. They have walked through something today that most lonely people never see. They have looked directly at the weight crushing them and recognized it is not theirs, not their trauma, not their expectations, not their conditioning, not their grief. It belongs to ancestors who could not process it, to parents who never lived it, to a culture that imposed it, to a collective that demanded they absorb it, and they took it all on, sensitive, caring, believing that carrying was their purpose. That burden gave them worth, that being the holder, the carrier, the absorber, was what made them valuable, but it does not. It makes them exhausted, lonely, slowly destroyed by weight they never chose. And now they know the weight is not theirs, and they are allowed to put it down. Carl Jung taught that the most revolutionary act is becoming yourself, and becoming yourself requires releasing what is not you. The ancestral trauma is not them. The parental expectations are not them. The cultural conditioning is not them. The collective grief is not them. These are weights they carried, burdens they absorbed, but they are not their identity. Beneath the weight is a person, a sovereign individual with their own life, their own energy, their own purpose. And that person has been suffocating, dying under the pressure of carrying everyone else's unlived material. And now that person can finally breathe because the weight is coming off, not all at once, but piece by piece, day by day, through practice, through boundaries, through ritual release, through finally courageously saying, "This is not mine. I will not carry it anymore." The loneliness that comes from carrying weight that is not yours is specific. It is the loneliness of being unseen, of carrying burden no one acknowledges, of suffering under invisible weight while others wonder why you are so tired when your life looks so easy. And this loneliness ends not when others finally see the weight. It ends when you finally put it down, when you stop waiting for validation that the burden is real and start releasing it anyway, when you stop needing others to understand and start choosing yourself regardless. Because the truth is that most people will never see what you carry. They are too busy carrying their own weight, or too unconscious to feel weight at all, and that is okay. You do not need them to see it. You just need to put it down and discover that without it, you are not weak. You are whole. Which weight did they carry? Ancestral trauma, parental expectations, cultural conditioning, collective grief. And will they keep carrying it, keep destroying themselves under burden that was never theirs, keep living lonely and exhausted while everyone wonders what is wrong with them? Or will they finally put it down? Will they honor the ancestors by breaking the cycle instead of perpetuating it? Will they disappoint their parents by living authentically instead of living for approval? Will they reject cultural conditioning by choosing their own path? Will they establish boundaries so collective grief stops drowning them? Share which weight they recognized. Their honesty might help another lonely person see their invisible burden. Subscribe for more on releasing what is not yours and reclaiming your energy. 2 more videos appearing now. Choose one to continue. Until we meet again, remember this. The weight that the lonely carry is not theirs. And carrying it does not make them noble, it makes them martyrs. And martyrdom is not service, it is self-destruction. They are not here to carry everyone else's unprocessed pain. They are not responsible for healing ancestral wounds alone. They are not obligated to fulfill parental dreams. They are not required to conform to cultural scripts. They are not meant to absorb collective suffering. They are here to live their own life. And living requires energy. Energy that has been going to carrying weight that does not belong to them. Jung taught that the second half of life is for individuation, for becoming yourself by releasing what is not you. And for the lonely ones, for the carriers, for the absorbers, individuation means putting down the weight, finally, completely, without guilt. Because they are not abandoning anyone by releasing burden. They are freeing everyone. Freeing the ancestors by breaking the cycle, freeing the parents by letting them carry their own disappointments, freeing the culture by refusing to conform, freeing the collective by having boundaries, and most importantly, freeing themselves to finally live light, to finally live free, to finally live their own life instead of carrying everyone else's unlived one. The weight is not theirs, and it is time to put it down.